Yeah, if I may, let me go back for a moment, right, and touch on one thing that I find very, very interesting. You kind of mentioned, right, that data is the new currency. Like currency, data suffers from inflation, which means that the more you have, the less valuable it is. It's about really finding the right data with the right level, the right quality, the right cleanliness, in order to be able to do good stuff with it.
Welcome to Tea Talks, where we dive into the stories behind the leaders shaping our world. I'm your host, TJ Wallia. Today, we're thrilled to have Marcello Majonchi, the Chief Product Officer at Arduino, joining us. With over 2 decades in the tech industry, Marcello has a profound passion for creating and enhancing products that not only captivate users, but also serve meaningful purposes. At Arduino, the leading open source platform for the Internet of Things, he's been instrumental in crafting solutions that make a tangible impact on the businesses every day. Marcello combines his deep industry knowledge with a unique ability to build dynamic teams. Join us as we dive into his journey, explore the philosophy behind his work, and uncover the joys of creating technology that truly changes the world. Marcello, welcome to Tea Talks.
Hey, TJ, thank you for having me.
It's an absolute pleasure, and thank you for being here. Marcello, I just talked about, your role at Arduino and the journey that you've had. I'd love for our listeners to understand what that journey was for you personally, how you got to where you are, and any pivotal roles that you or moments that you had along the way that brought you to where you are today. I'd love to hear that from you, please.
Oh, that's a big question. I think that over the last 25 years, right, I was lucky enough to have several pivotal moments, right, or moments that looking back I see as sliding doors moments. I think that the biggest one is actually the chain of events that brought me to the US, which has been defining in the second part of my career. And I think that the pivotal moment was me really looking to join a startup in the first place in order to get the opportunity, right, to take a role that otherwise would not have been available to me. The observation was that in order to do what I really would have loved to do in my life, which was being a manager in a multinational tech company, I didn't have the right qualification. I wasn't in the right country, and didn't have the right experience. And so my observation and my takeaway was that if I couldn't get the job that I wanted, I would have to build it myself or manufacture the job out of thin air, right? And the way that the only way that I thought of was join a startup and helping that startup grow in order eventually at some point to get to a point where that startup would have had the role that was the role that I wanted. And little did I know that would have led me to one of the most transformational experiences of my career, joining the startup that was called Solaire in the business of Internet of Things, and helping growing that startup all the way to becoming an international leader into that emerging space, and then in 2016, right, being acquired by Microsoft, and then being part of the Azure IoT team at Microsoft.
Wow. I mean, that's a lot there. And I want to unpack some of that because the beginning where you're coming into a whole new country, you're coming into a whole new environment where you don't have the background, you don't have the understanding and the qualifications, like you said, but then you said, I'm going to build that. Like the confidence. There's a lot of people that come in, my family is an immigrant family, and there's a lot of immigrant families that do come into the country, but they settle for whatever is given to them. And I remember when I was in university, there used to be a hot dog vendor right outside our university. Amazing guy, one of the best hot dogs we used to have. He's retired now. But when I spoke to him, he was an engineer from Iran. And I, used to question like this gentleman who dedicated his life to engineering, was successful over there, came to a country for a better life for his family, and then ended up being a hot dog vendor essentially. And then there was yourself. Right, you came in, you saw that I don't have the qualification or the background, but I'm going to build it. Help me understand where that comes from and what others can learn from that journey of not giving up and building something and then landing at Microsoft. Because if you hadn't taken that step, I don't think, and let me know if you agree, but you wouldn't have ended up at Microsoft. And now the head of product at Arduino, like this wouldn't have happened, right?
Absolutely. This is why I'm talking about sliding doors, right? And I think that the way that I think about this is actually in terms of, I think that early in your career, you have a superpower, which is, not having much to lose, right? Because you haven't built your legacy, your brand, your experience yet, right? And so you can take gambles, right? You can take risks because it's all upsides, right? Because you almost have no downsides, and I think that is really a superpower, and it's something that I always advise young professionals to take advantage of, because either you do that when you are early in your career and under that circumstances, or you will never actually be able to do that. And I think that for me, sometimes jokingly I say that the best decisions that I made in my life were out of desperation, right? Because at that point, right, you really lean in because you are forced to do so, and by leaning in, you create the conditions for you to be ultimately successful in the first place.
I love that. I absolutely love that. And a lot of times in desperation, people panic. People make the wrong decisions, right? So help me understand the decision-making process there, right? Because of course you clearly had the option of, let me just get a job and do whatever it is and go down that path. What forced you to say, you know what, I don't have anything to lose. I have, everything to gain from doing this and taking this risk. Help me understand the thinking behind that, because that is what you're doing. Even while you were at Microsoft, while you're at Arduino, you're taking risks. You're taking, weighted risks, if you will. But help me understand that decision-making process of what you go through to understand that if this is the right thing to do or not.
Yeah, so actually, just to give you a little bit more context, right? I actually had the job that I was actually pretty happy with, right? I was working with friends of mine that are still to this day, right, very good friends. But the reality is that I didn't have in that job the right ceiling height right above me, right? And so I felt constrained, right? Is that I can continue like that my entire life, and I can make I would say a reasonably decent living, but with no thrills, with no real satisfactions. And I always felt, probably naively, that I could do more, right? That under the right circumstances I could have made a little difference. And I kind of realized that I had a good job, but it wasn't an amazing job. It wasn't well paid at all. It was just fairly paid, but kind of pretty low level job. And so my observation is that I even if I walked away from that, right, and whatever I didn't work out, I could have walked back to that, right? And so I always had that option, right? And so the risk was really minimal, especially compared to the potential that, albeit being very unlikely, it was extremely high. It was like it's like buying a lottery ticket, right? At the end of the day, the chances of winning are extremely thin, but the cost of a ticket is very low. So it's not that they are risking that much, right? If a lottery ticket, costed like $1 billion, right, you would think twice, right, before buying it. But if it costs $1, yeah, sure, why not, right? And that why not, attitude, I think that is something that that really helped me, and this is just something that I was lucky to have. And going to the second part of your question, right, about how you take that then later in your career. It's all about assessing risk and dealing with it, right? Something that I always say to my team, for example, is that in order to maximize the result, the approach that I think is the most efficient is to look at that in terms of what can I do in order to minimize the risk of failing, right? Because at the end of the day, right, that's our job, right? In the sense that we are set and we are paid to get an outcome, right? And if we want to get that outcome, we should focus on really preventing any obstacle, right, to get in our way.
Love that. Love that. So a couple things. So that moment you defined as a lottery moment. I love that, because that truly was a lottery moment. A lot of us go through those in terms of making that decision to say, you know what, let's let's take a bet on this and see where it goes. I had a moment like that when I was in university again as well. I was second year university. Our professor was late, night class that I was taking, and random gentleman I met, he coincidentally worked at Microsoft, and we started having a conversation. And he's the one that opened that door and said, "Hey, we're hiring. We're looking at something. You might have the right background and skill set based on what I was doing." So that was that lottery moment. Say, you know what? Let's take a bet on this. Most people say, "Yeah, I'm not ready for it yet," or "I don't know." I changed my entire life to take that moment. Right. So we have those moments. We have to identify those and pick on those. The other aspect you touched on was minimizing the risk of failure. I love that mindset because now you actually have a clear understanding of what is at stake versus what is there to obtain and grow towards. And having that mindset with your teams, I'd love to dig a little deeper in that because I think you're touching on helping them identify. Because usually what we do for teams is, here's your task, go figure it out, go do it. And we're never educating them or informing them of what's at stake if it's not done. Right. So if they have that relevance or that context, I think it will provide them a little bit more clarity, for one, in achieving their goals and the outcomes. But it also gives them a sense of responsibility and accountability. I think that if this doesn't work out the way we want it to, we've got a certain amount of failure on at stake. Help me understand that a little bit more in terms of what the conversation looks like with your teams there.
Yeah, I think that ultimately all boils down to thinking about minimizing the risk as a forcing function to have a quantitative approach to the gain and the pain that you go through. Right, that at the end of the day, you need to assess, right, what success is going to cost you, and what lack of success is going to cost you, right? And comparing, those two, and kind of, finding the right, that fine line, right? That is the best possible, right, combination of, of the two. And really, I think that, more than anything, this type of approach is a forcing function to think in terms of, quantity and not just quality. And this is also comes from our observation throughout, many years in my life and in my career, that I've seen not really a strong focus, and this goes across the board, right? Startups, small and medium businesses, super large tech corporations, not a big focus, or as big as you would expect, into really quantifying what success means. This is something that is staggering looking from the outside. How many kind of big bets, right, that are worth hundreds of millions of dollars are done just because it feels the right thing, not because there is a deep quantitative analysis right behind it. And putting yourself in the mindset and in within the framework of finding the best approximation of having a quantitative model is really the key to me to being able to even assess if you have been successful in the end. Because that's the other part, right? If you don't know what really success is, if you can't quantify it beforehand, you put yourself right in the condition of not being able to tell if you're being successful or not, unless you've been wildly successful or you failed miserably. But all the the gray zone in between is very hard to assess.
Yeah, again, I love what you're sharing. There's so much to unpack out of all of this. The one example I want to share, I was watching an interview from the CEO of NVIDIA, just I think it was yesterday or 2 nights ago, and he was talking about when he started. He said he didn't even complete his business plan. He didn't know how to complete his business plan. So what you were talking about, it feels right, right? Could you imagine if he said, if I spent my entire time completing that business plan, I wouldn't have launched, and it wouldn't have been what it is today. So there are decisions you have to make. Sometimes you don't have all the answers, but it feels right that you want to move forward with.
Yeah, it's all about taking educated guesses, right, and understanding, right, as quantitatively as you can. What is the level, right, of detail that you need in order to feel comfortable? Because of course, right, you can just take decisions in just out of thin air, but you cannot wait to have all the data that is possibly available to make that decision. You need to find what is your threshold, and ultimately, that threshold is also your, very closely related to your risk tolerance.
Absolutely. I had one of our guests on, Mike Thibodeau, a few weeks ago, and he had talks about the concept of 80% go. When he hits 80% and he's comfortable with everything he has, that threshold you're talking about, let's go, right? Like we'll figure out the rest of it as we go along, not waiting for it to be perfected. You talked about understanding what success is for anyone who's going to go down a certain path. How do you define that for your teams? How does that look like? Because success for each individual is sometimes different. I've seen activities or exercises where you can take a team and you can give them a message, and if you ask every individual what their go-to task is for that success metric, it's different from each person. So how do you kind of balance that aspect and show the team this is what our mutual team success looks like? And not just from a numbers perspective. I think everyone understands, okay, that's my target, that's what I have to go through. But the overall success as it relates to the culture, the team building, all of that, because those are success metrics as well. You don't want to be running people over while achieving that success. How do you define that for your teams?
Well, I grew up from a family of farmers, right? And so I go back to kind of, a farmer metaphor, right? When you're a farmer, right, you have three main activities, right? You set up the ground, you seed, and then you harvest, right? And I think that you actually need to kind of, tackle those activities in reverse order, because of course, right, you start by focusing on, the next harvest. Then you need to seed for the next year, but also you need to kind of, lay up ground for, future, crops. Right. And I think that is the same when you focus on success. It's kind of understanding, right, from a business perspective, what do I need to harvest this year in order to, make sure that my company will survive if it's a startup, right, to next year? What seeds I need to plant in order to set myself up for being able, to create a business that is sustainable, right? And then what are the big bets, right? The long shots, the moon shots that I need to kind of start thinking about today in order not to be disrupted or displaced in the medium to long term, right? And this is the framework that boils down, right, to the activity of any product manager, right? Is about what I need to ship this year in order to maximize my impact of the market, what I need to do in terms of planning and in terms of strategy for for next year, and what is my long-term strategy in order to make a dent into the business.
That's very cool. I love how you're taking your upbringing and applying that into this space. But you're right. If you don't know what your harvest is going to look like, then you don't know what seeds you need to plant, right? And then for those seeds, each variety of them have different groundwork that needs to be laid out. So I love how you break that down and you structure that. It's very, very sound advice. I want to switch up a little bit because your life in terms of what you're doing, it seems like it's, there's a lot going on. There's a lot of planning. There's a lot of execution. There's a lot of combination of that. You talked about defining that fine line in terms of where things are. I'm going to take that fine line and put that into work-life balance. What does that look like for Marcello in terms of, and your team for that matter, in terms of how you structure and protect yourself and your time and your sanity, including your mental health, and making sure you can get to the gym if you're doing that. All of that while executing on all cylinders here.
This is where, to be honest, DJ, I need to, be transparent and truthful, right? Because I would love, to tell you, right, this great story that, I nailed it, right? My work-life balance is perfect. I wake up, at 4 a.m. in the morning. I hit the gym every day, and then kind of time for my son and for the dog and for the family, so so on and so forth. The reality is far from that, and I have this the suspicion that there are more people like me than the other way. The reality is that for many years in the past, I operated under one very simple observation. Successful in any kind of dimension or measure, I could not rely on the assumption of being the smartest in the room, because that I would have been outsmarted, right, and wasn't under my control. I could not have been the most educated in the room, because I simply wasn't. But one thing that I had under my control was how hard I would work, so I could always be the hardest working in the room, and that is something that really served a purpose for me. Because it was an intentional choice, right, of really, showing up, standing up, and raising your hand. However, in the long run, that approach took a toll, right? And it's kind of easy to become a candle that burns from both ends. Fast forward many years, I found myself that that candle was burning too fast, and I needed to do something, right? Also because the values and the priorities that I in the life, at that point had shifted, right? And I wanted to focus on different things that were only career work. And out of necessity and out of burning need, I started to be more intentional in setting up my spaces around my personal life. Also, trying not to be defined too much by my job, because that's the other risk, right? If you if you live for your job, you let your job define yourself completely, which means that the moment that you're not successful, right, as a professional, you perceive yourself as not successful as an individual, as a human being. I don't think that I have a recipe or particularly insightful nugget of wisdom. Is just that I just try to to ride the wave when I could, and to survive, right, to stay afloat when I had to, and in the end, that has worked for me, and I've been also lucky, I think.
I think there's more to it than that, Marcello. In terms of the way you're saying it, you're simplifying it in certain ways, but I think you've been deliberate, right? So you talked about not being the smartest in the room or not being the most educated in the room, and that's okay. I've been there, and I go through that all the time. And with that, you became the hardest working because you had to kind of level up in different ways, and you did. You proved yourself, and from there, once you started the family aspect of it, you said things have to shift. Right. So being deliberate. Now we've got to put it into a different gear and slow down and say, okay, I need to protect some time because I need to make sure I nurture the family and protect the family and provide for the family the way you need to. So I think there's some deliberation there as well. When we were younger, I think we were all, operating on the highest RPMs the car goes just to get to where we needed to. And for me, I know I'm a big advocate of work-life balance, but what people don't know is in my early 20s, not my early 20s, my entire 20s up until the age of 30, I was working, I was on the road from 7 a.m. Sorry, I should say 6 a.m. because my work started at 7 a.m. So from 6 a.m. until midnight every single day. I would go to school part time, I would work full time, and I was constantly on the road. But those years, that's what I did because that was a priority to kind of get ahead, not just relax and coast and go on cruise control. But once that shifted, my daughter was born when I was 30. At that point, the first year, I didn't see her. I would, she'd be sleeping when I'm leaving the house, and when I'm coming back, she's sleeping, and I'm like, this is not the way I want to live my life. So I changed everything. I packed up, moved to a different city, new opportunity, and I worked from home. And ever since then, I've been working from home, and I've been there for the kids. So to your point, the priorities shifted because I said I don't want to leave, pass my entire life and say I wasn't there for the kids. There are elements of being deliberate. So work-life balance for me there was none. Before in my 20s. In my 30s, it shifted entirely where I was prioritizing the family and I was focused on it. Now that the kids are older, I'm putting things in a different gear again and say, yeah, what, I can be out more. I can do all of that. So it's being deliberate about seeing what works for you. The challenge becomes when it's not working for you and you're failing at work and you're failing at home and you're failing everywhere else because you're not being deliberate. We have to protect that time. We have to protect that energy that we have as well. And that has an impact on our mental health. So if we don't take care of those things, our mental health goes down, it gets degraded, and everything gets worse. So we need to be deliberate about where we're investing our time and for what reasons. So that's how I would look at it as well. And I think you've done the right things along the way to make sure that you can be in this position, because if that wasn't taken care of early, then you would have been working at that same pace for the rest of your life, like a lot of people do as well, right?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I guess that I just want to kind of highlight the fact that I've been reactive, right? Also to that, in the sense that sometimes I had some oh shoot moments, right, where I kind of realized that I had to change something. And so my being deliberate was not just coming from being particularly enlightened, but just from sometimes being forced to that. And I think that to your point, I think that it's important as an entrepreneur, as a leader, to be aware that different people in different phases of their lives will have different priorities. And so work-life balance is not a one-size-fits-all type of thing, but it's more kind of an equilibrium. And I think that more than protecting work-life balance, as a leader, you need to respect the equilibrium that each person chooses for themselves in that particular moment of their lives and their careers. And I think that that's kind of the key, because if someone's want to focus on their career, you should support that and give them opportunity. At the same time, if people are in a phase where they want or need right to prioritize their personal life, their families, and so on, you should be kind of respectful and also mindful of not penalizing them, right, for making that choice. I think that that's the key, and that's, I think, that also the secret of having a healthy team, right, that feels respected and supported by the company or their leadership.
Absolutely, and it builds that trust. It gives them the space to grow, to fail, to succeed. It gives them that space rather than them doing it out of fear. And I always speak about this as well. You can have someone who always hits their deadlines. However, you don't know the quality of work that went into that deadline. So it could be the bare minimum that they did to get past that line, or if they had the space to do things the way they needed to, the level of quality goes up in that output that they're providing. So giving them that space is entirely important. I do want to switch gears just a little bit, Marcello, in terms of your background as well in the IoT space. There's a lot of buzz about AI right now, and everyone's all over AI, and it seems like IoT is kind of like that forgotten child where no one's talking about it. However, I want to have our audience understand the impact and the role IoT plays when it comes to AI, because I don't think a lot of people understand where some of this data comes from for this decision making that AI uses or utilizes. So I'd love to get your perspectives on what that correlation between the Internet of Things, the IoT devices and sensors, and AI really is, and what you guys are aiming towards.
Yeah, let me just start by saying that sometimes looking at this super hype moment that AI is living, right, that it feels like a big deja vu, right? Because if you go back like 10 years, 12 years, replace AI with IoT was exactly the same, right? You can have reports from big advisory firms about AI, kind of find and replace AI with IoT. They would say exactly the same thing. But that said, I think that the interesting point to make is that IoT, despite not being anymore at the peak of hype, has not failed as a technology, has morphed into something different as it reached the plateau of maturity. Right. The reality is that at the very beginning, IoT was supposed to become like ERP or CRM, right, a new category, right, of technology. But in reality, it kind of it shaped itself in a different way as a combination of enabling technologies in order to bring a new element into the equation of technology, which is devices, right? And if you look at IoT through that lens, IoT is a pretty healthy space with double-digit growth of connected devices year over year, and thanks to the advances of technology, the reduction of price, and the reduction of computational capabilities per power consumption. Today, you can afford to put technology to smaller and cheaper devices, right? Distributing intelligence, even I hate that word, but distributing intelligence all over the place in order to enable many more scenarios, and effectively with the result of being able to democratize the access to that technology.
Absolutely. And I think one of the other buzzwords that people are talking about is data is the new currency that they talk about, and and they relate it to AI. What they don't realize is that IoT sensors and devices are the ones that print that currency. And there's an influx of data that comes out of them. So a lot of organizations don't realize that having the right IoT sensors and devices and technologies in their space is going to give them a huge influx of data that they never even imagined that would get certain specific desired outcomes from. Because I've worked in the IoT space, and there's scenarios that come up with this data that you can't even imagine. I remember there was an example of a manufacturing organization who had a vibration sensor on one of their machines, and all it was doing was just to see if it was calibrated correctly or not. Interestingly enough, they found new data out of that because they started picking up earthquakes and tremors underneath the ground that they never had or anticipated before. So new data started coming in, and they thought the machines were out of sync, and it turned out that no, it was actually an earthquake that they were sensing. So there's so many levels of it that you can actually build out of, and so many solutions that come out of these things that we don't even imagine sometimes. So having an influx of sensors is one thing, but the other thing I want to touch on is it's not that it's a forgotten technology. I think it's starting to become seamless. It's becoming a standard or norm. Before it was like, oh, I've got this amazing sensor that does this, or this new gadget that does this. They're just everywhere now, and they're just seamless. So it's expected, and it's almost like the norm, if you will.
Yeah, if I may, let me go back for a moment, right, and touch on one thing that I find very, very interesting. You kind of mentioned, right, that data is the new currency. It's not the prettiest of the terminology, but I also think that it's very, very fitting for one specific reason. Like currency, data suffers from inflation, which means that the more you have, the less valuable it is. And I think that is a mistake that we all did back in the day with big data, right? Let's collect data. Let's dump that on a blob storage somewhere on the cloud. At some point, eventually, we'll find a use for it, right? That was the wrong approach, right? It's about really finding the right data with the right level, the right quality, the right cleanliness, in order to be able to do good stuff with it.
Absolutely, and that's essential. And a lot of people, to your point, you're bang on. It's not about having all the data in the world. It's having the right data that is useful, that's functional, and to your point, clean data that we need to have, because a lot of people don't understand that. They don't, and they don't even know how to clean up their existing data, let alone looking for new data, right? So there's a lot of challenges there as well. In terms of the future of where IoT and AI are headed now, what are your thoughts on that in terms of the growth in each space, depending on where people are in their journey of making those decisions?
I think that, to be honest, I think that for AI, any prediction right now is very risky because there is this massive expansion phase of AI, right? Fueled by the hype, but also is still extremely early, not in the technology itself, because every single foundational technology in AI has been around for more than a decade, but in the implementation of that technology and in the form factor of consumption of that technology. So the reality is that any prediction is the result of an interpolation of not enough data to be kind of anywhere near being accurate, right? So I think that there is definitely something around language models. It's obvious, but I think that the way that we consume and the way that we access to language models is going to dramatically change in the future because of the cost of running this large models. On the IoT side of things, on the other hand, I think that we had enough experience and enough data to be able to to determine with a pretty good degree of accuracy the trajectory in the future. And I think that it goes on two parallel paths. On one side, as we said, IoT and connected intelligence is really becoming ubiquitous, right? And every single thing that is not a book or something extremely simple has the potential of being connected and being active, right? And being able to react independently to the environment. And that is a substrate, right? It becomes a substrate for people of the future to invent new things, right? And then on the other hand, it being everywhere, being ubiquitous, it's a extremely valuable forcing function to democratize access to technology. Which means, that everybody in the world has access to a coding device these days. Right, and I mean almost everybody, right? From developing countries to the more evolved countries. Such an ugly term, but it's technology is not a barrier anymore, and this creates an amazingly larger breeding grounds for innovation.
Absolutely. And even the term about, you're talking about evolved countries versus developing countries, I think that's going to shift as well, because that definition was really about from a financial perspective. But if you look at what the opportunity is in those quote unquote developing countries, it's greenfield. And I talk to people about this as well when I'm talking to my clients. I say, for us to retrofit an existing infrastructure or building with IoT sensors and AI and all those components, it's a lot of work because you have to rip and replace, you have to make modifications, etc. In a greenfield, you just build with it from the ground up, and the opportunity is humongous over there. It's very large and significant and rich. So there's going to be a gap in terms of those developing countries getting much further ahead. We look at them as full nations. It's funny how we do this. We look at them as full nations, as developing nations. However, when we look at the developed, we don't look at the suburbs of the cities that we're in. Some of them don't have high-speed internet, and we're in the same boat, but we don't classify that, and we don't link that in those developing countries. And I say developing again with emphasis. If you look at the main hubs, they're further ahead.
And again, going back, right, tie it back to the beginning of our conversation, they have the superpower of having nothing to lose.
Yeah.
So they can innovate more freely, right? Because they don't have the burden, right, of the status quo to kind of sustain, right? And if you combine that, right, with the fact that these days you can get a prototyping board to give you access to machine learning models running on the edge, by spending just literally, right, a couple of dollars. It means that anybody in the world can really, potentially afford that and can have access to that technology, which is, if you ask me, amazing. And tying it back to, my personal life, this is what makes me proud of, doing what I'm doing with Arduino, because it's really, about tearing down the barriers, right, of giving access and actively contributing to, giving opportunities to change the world to, almost anybody on this planet.
Absolutely. Completely agree with that. Marcello, it's time to change things up for us now. So we're ready for the rapid fire segment. I hope you are as well. The rules, very simple.
Yeah, sure.
I'm going to ask you questions, and you have to respond with the first thing that comes to mind. And we just go from one after the other. The first one's fairly easy, but you ready to go?
I am.
All right, let's do this. Tea or coffee?
Coffee.
Okay. One gadget you can't live without?
A pen.
Like that. Non-techie. Interesting.
But a high quality one.
A high quality one. Is it a connected pen?
No, it's just kind
pen.
of machine milled, brass, solid brass pen.
Love it. Your wake up time?
Too early.
I'm curious now. You got me. How early is too early?
4:30.
Wow.
But not to work out. Just to have kind of meetings with Europe.
Okay, so it's a necessity. Last thing you touch before going to bed?
Unfortunately, my phone.
One tech leader you'd love to have a chat with?
Ooh, this is a good one. I would say Jeff Bezos, which is probably not what you would expect.
That's interesting. Yeah, we'll have a further conversation on that one, though. The future of work as you see it in one word?
Distributed.
Most promising tech trend in the next 5 years?
I would say augmented reality with a caveat. There is an if we find the right form factor to consume the technology, which doesn't exist yet.
Doesn't exist. You're right. Yeah, that's interesting.
The next billionaire is not related to, this is my prediction, it's going to be wild, I'm going to be wildly off, but, the next billionaire is not going to be related to AI or ML, but it's going to be, the guy that nails the form factor to consume the metaverse.
Yeah, no, it's true. It's so true. Last question. If animals could talk, which would you want to chat with? Not including any of your pets if you have.
Oh, this is a tough one. I would probably, think about some of the kind of, oldest living being in the planet. Like, I think that there is this kind of, tree formation that is, 10,000 years old. they probably have seen things, and I would love to kind of get their perspective on living across that time frame.
Awesome. Well, Marcello, thank you very much for being here. Really enjoyed this conversation. Loved your insights. And until next time, I want to have you back maybe next 6 to 12 months and see what that conversation looks like in terms of who that next billionaire is for sure.
Absolutely. That was fun. I was happy to join anytime.
Thank you, Marcello, for sharing your valuable insights and experiences with us today. It's been a true pleasure. To our listeners, thank you for tuning in. Be sure to subscribe to Tea Talks for more conversations with the leaders who are shaping our future. Until next time, keep on inspiring.